Alright, I'll be honest with you. I'm sitting here thinking about what happened with Czechoslovakia back in 1937, um, and whatnot. Because you see, if you look at the documentaries, it says Chernobyl blew up in 1979. Actually, that was just the date of the documentary. Chernobyl blew up 1939. From the records I got from overseas, making at least the title in the YouTube documentary, pretty interesting. And maybe I'm getting that confused with the meltdown in Harrisburg. Um, but anyway, let's get back to it. Czechoslovakia never actually had a nuclear power plant, and with this being said, I'm trying to figure out how they figure, running core rods of what they call nuclear material down in, which every design I look at incorporates a certain type of metal, highly resistant to, not electricity, but it makes electricity. And anyway, I explaining certain things to NASA and some of the more nuclear scientists in the U.S. A nuclear meltdown, even they claim they use water to cool it down in the system, because if you use coolant, you would have a massive, not isotope problem, because coolant doesn't have isotopes. You wouldn't get isotopes through any type of metal. Let's see. The only thing I know that uses isotopes is blood. I mean, blood has isotopes. You guys don't know the definitions on a lot of medical terms. But anyway, water doesn't have isotopes, coolant doesn't have isotopes, oil doesn't have isotopes, at least clear oil. Let's see, what else do they have? Machinery, oil, gear oil, that doesn't have isotopes. Let's see, tea, milk doesn't have isotopes. I mean, this is kind of mind-boggling, because, when you start talking about isotopes, you start talking about like the skin on someone, mixed with blood. Ovary has an isotope, or sometimes we refer to an ovary as an isotope. But let's see, isotope. So metal fragments would be metal fragments. Even lead doesn't have an isotope in the metal. Plutonium does not have an isotope in the metal. Iron doesn't have isotopes, even at high levels. Let's see, brass, steel, aluminum, none of them have isotopes in their metals. Let's see, cast sand, metal doesn't have isotopes. And let's see, piss and poop doesn't have isotopes, so let's see, freon doesn't have isotopes. Oil on freon doesn't have isotopes. Maybe they were just talking about the people scattered all over the freaking place. I mean, that's the best explanation I can come up with. Because when they start talking about isotopes, you start talking about either something from another planet brought here, which really I don't even think you have really any technical living isotopes, unless you're referring to a cellular or a made up of cellulars. and whatnot. But then that would be a biological disaster area, not a radiation area. I mean, what did you guys do? Just throw a bunch of radiators around and call it radiation? Um, see. Enzymes. Now, enzymes, that's an interesting word you guys like to use. You know, like, oh, you got enzymes in your stomach, you got enzymes in your intestines, and etc., etc., etc. I really wouldn't call those enzymes. A lot of people think the enzymes are in atoms and skin and blood and all that stuff. Um, they try to refer to an enzyme as a clear liquid in an atom sometimes. You see, your definition as far as United States scientific research is all over the place. One minute it has an endoplasmic reticulum, next minute it has an enzyme, next minute it has probably Nickelodeon crazy goo. You know, you guys just don't make sense when you come down to your scientifics, because you don't keep to your medical definitions for stuff. I just think you got a bunch of guys or people running around with low end education, and you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about. Gunpowder doesn't have isotopes. Sometimes, you know, in medical terms, they refer to, you know, brain matter, the fluid in brain matter as isotopes. I mean, what do you guys do? Stick a bunch of aliens in a nuclear reactor? Let's see. But one thing Chernobyl does have in the area that you were talking about was a huge nuclear, well, not nuclear, excuse me, delete erase nuclear, after kind of just making fun of myself. But anyway, it had a huge liquid fuel reserve for rocket fuel, a certain type of rocket fuel. When you mix it in with a powder resolve, kind of like your gunpowder and stuff, and you not cook it, but you put it into a certain, well, I'm not going to go into it because I know the United States doesn't have very good rockets, but you manufacture a rocket fuel in a certain way. And you see, there was an argument back then with Czechoslovakia and Greenland and Nova Scotia to why the U.S. couldn't have any recipe or any knowledge of how to make this certain type of rocket fuel. And one of the reasons is that it was highly and very vulnerable. Now, a lot of people in Czechoslovakia might say, hold on, what's this guy talking about? But if you start thinking about what I'm saying, there's no reason that reactor should have actually blown its top off unless you're using hot, I mean, even with coolant, I mean, you're talking almost 900 Fahrenheit, maybe 1200 Fahrenheit before coolant would actually explode, which would almost I won't say instantly powderize, but I mean, you're talking an extreme amount of heat. By then, if you're running 800, 1200 Fahrenheit, anyone within inside the facility would almost be cooked pretty close to, oh, well, if you spent 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes in there, you'd be cooked. I mean, you'd be like a turkey on Thanksgiving Day in some senses. Let's see. I'm trying to come up with, the explanation, because the explanation is more BS than it is truthful. Let's see. So if we go back to this, anyway, we go back to the conflict in the U.S. between the U.S. and Czechoslovakia about this rocket fuel, and the U.S. really got ticked off because Czechoslovakia would not give in to giving any type of ingredients or anything about a lot of different products and everything. within inside the United States because they didn't want manufacturing inside the United States. I mean, there was some manufacturing, like your furniture, certain types of dressers, drawers, and everything else and whatnot. They really wanted kind of the United States or North America to grow up kind of like Africa, huge, not Amazon, but, they have trees that, almost span 5 to 10 feet across in a circle, if you, and whatnot. Therefore providing, like better timber and whatnot, but it's also better for the land itself to get some stability. Because when you go out towards west, out past Oklahoma and everything, the ground tends to get a little bit more mushy and it's not as stable and whatnot. And so a lot of big trees would stabilize the regions, especially up in North Dakota and stuff, where you got North South Dakota, Montana, where you got huge amounts of flooding. And you kind of ask, well, how would that stabilize the region? Well, I mean, in some senses, if the dirt doesn't flow happily down to, say, Texas, Nevada, to different waterways, and the trees to help hold that back, then you don't have to worry so much about huge disasters. Like trees just up and rooting and floating down and wiping out stuff. So anyway, let's get back to Czechoslovakia. The conflict went on for almost 45 years. I think it even went up to, let's see, like, I know it went up to 1986, and then I just turned around and told them to give them the lesser ingredient to rocket fuel. So they end up blowing themselves up and then turning around and trying to point fingers back at Czechoslovakia, because that's one thing the United States did. It was constantly liking to point fingers at, the person who supplied any knowledge about anything and whatnot. But then the U.S. turned around at the same breath and said, "Oh, what are you doing? Are you traveling out to space, Neptune, Saturn?" Oh, hell yeah, we are, dude. We're not going to stay just on this planet and become shake and bake for the sun. I mean, you guys you think this planet's going to be around forever? It's not going to be around forever. That's the interesting part, is how naive the United States is to its own history and past, because it was never actually a country. United States resolved in mainly by its name. More so, it went away from North America in 1868 as being referred to as North America, because it was Canada was the upper North Arctic region, and whatnot, and Canada got away from the United States in a way of saying, this is the upper North Arctic region. Guess what? You want to get away from North America? Go ahead and try to, but we're gonna stick with a name that is actually legal. And they went over to Britain and got a legal name for what is now Canada, by the correct channels, and whatnot. So people are like, why is it when I go to Britain my head doesn't hurt, but when I come to the United States my head, I get headaches, I get nauseated. The food tends to make you sick. It tends to. The one complaint was the food changes. I've seen that here, where like you'd be eating a ham sandwich and all of a sudden it tastes funny, and it's like, what was that about? And stuff. But anyway, getting back to Czechoslovakia, I mean, as far as the documentary and saying nuclear this, nuclear that would blow things up, only other thing I could think of was the misuse of certain chemicals, but once again, you wouldn't have isotopes, you just have a huge explosion. Blue water would do that. Blue water is actually The one thing that I kind of put on my blog about Elizabeth was guilty of, or I shouldn't say guilty, was accused of dumping what they call clear or blue antifreeze into the water and whatnot. This became a huge problem off some of their coast. So when you see that, really nice blue light water, I wouldn't go swimming unless you wanted your skin to be irritated. And whatnot. I mean, if they use Nickelodeon goo and Czechoslovakian reactors, it's a really, really bad idea, which is the slime. But I don't even think they even got that far. As far as what I know, it was just straight up water. For water to cool or chill at a high end 500 Fahrenheit temperature would be almost insane. Over there, it's a little bit more colder than it is here. So, I mean, Pennsylvania is it's pretty close to being in line with Czechoslovakia, but not being in line with Czechoslovakia. So, I don't know. As far as these people making documentaries, I'm going to say bull. S-H-I-T. And like I said, I can tell you how I know this. Because you'll see in videos, if you really ask for the real, the more color advanced videos, you'll see people walking around with like red eyes. And normally, when a chemical company explodes and you're not right down in what they call the zero zone, the zero zone's where it would either be incinerated or burned to a high degree. I mean, you would talk about almost an eighth of an inch to even possibly a quarter of an inch of being cooked. I mean, even napalm doesn't have isotopes. But anyway, if you're in, the worst place to actually be is not on zero. If you're in zero, you're pretty much gone. You're dead. I mean, you got out lucky. But beyond the 500-foot perimeter to a 1,000-foot perimeter, or the half mile to the 1 mile. Actually, I can't say 500 feet to 1,000. That's inside zero. But the half a mile to the 1 mile to the quarter mile to an eighth of a mile they're the zones that really tend to get you, because when you see people with red eyes, it means their eyes literally exploded without actually destroying the outer eye, part of the eye. And that's how I know it's an explosion. It's not a radiation chemical reaction, and then they show your kids bleeding out their eyeballs. Well, that's because their eyes actually gave way to the explosion or the pressure that was pretty much forced through their skin into their skull, and now they have it inside their head. A lot of medical treatments aren't there for that. I mean, in some senses, if someone pulled a gun out and shot the person in the head, that's probably the best thing, especially if you're within certain say the tenth to an eighth of a mile, because it would be like having the worst migraine in the world. I know this for a fact. But at the same time, some of these people might actually welcome the fact of being shot in the head, and because it puts you out almost immediately in certain senses. Pills won't even help you at that point. You just want to puke. Everything you eat up, the pressure is enormous on the skull and whatnot. But anyway, let's get back to the topic. Your insides within a certain, especially like the 10th of a mile to an eighth of a mile, would almost gellify because of the blast and what they refer to as a sound wave put together. Those two things would just, it screws up how the body runs and its own rhythmic pattern. The eighth of a mile to the 10th of the mile, you would have a heart almost literally exploding in the chest, at least 2 ventricles in the heart. Zero, even at the 10th of a mile, you'd have a total heart explode. But, I'm just not buying this BS of so-called good investigation, because I know science and I know how it works, and I know what an explosion can do and whatnot, because I've played around with certain things that do explode, and I know that if, like, you take a cherry bomb, or let's say a Tomcat's pretty weak against a cherry bomb, but a firecracker, and you accidentally light it when it has too short of a fuse, and you throw it, and it's less than 3 feet from your hand, and it'll numb your hand. Now to imagine, like a billion tons to, let's say, I think it was 450 million tons of liquid rocket fuel starting to powderize, that's just almost an inferno in some senses. And over there, the plants were separated, all the different ingredients, to keep from accidents happening if a missile was launched from Israel onto Czechoslovakia. And like I said, you hit enough gunpowder in a warehouse. That's why they kept constantly moving stuff around in Czechoslovakia. Because if you look at certain studies and stuff, U.S. is questioning why Czechoslovakia is moving stuff around so much. To keep it, from having a large catastrophe and whatnot. So, anyway, that's all I'm going to say tonight. Good night. Looks funny, don't it? That little thing, black thing.